Dr. Tina Wu here today. You know, peptides is just in the news everywhere, and I know I get probably 5 emails a day at least. So I'm really looking forward to learning more and having her separate sort of the fact from myth. Um, Dr. Wu is both an MD and an MBA. She's HBS class of '09 and the co-founder of NoHo Labs, which is a physician-led health optimization company focused on evidence-based peptide therapies and personalized medicine. She's a practicing emergency physician and healthcare entrepreneur. So her experience goes beyond clinical medicine, technology, healthcare innovation. She was actually recognized by HBSWA of New York with the 2021 Rising Star Award. And she's been translating emerging medical science into practical solutions that help patients improve health span. So this is a huge difference from what traditional medicine has offered in the past. So at her lab, she works with clinicians, researchers, and patients to evaluate the rapidly evolving field of peptides. So, and the whole idea is to distinguish promising therapeutic applications from marketing hypes. So, we are thrilled to have her here today. And Dr. Wu, you can take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if I can do this. And then I'm going to do this. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Great.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I'm so thrilled to be able to be here. This is one of the second or third talk I've given to the HBS Women's Association, but I'm glad this is reaching a much broader audience. So really appreciate it. So we'll make this somewhat interactive. My co-founder, Matt Mazzio, who I'll introduce in a second, he's going to be, unfortunately, has to jump in at 9:30 or 12:30, whatever time zone you're at. So if you have any questions specifically for him, feel free to jump in early before he takes off. So just wanted to come here today because of there's so much movement in the peptide space right now. And so wanted to distill down for the audience here, fact versus fiction, educate whether peptides may or may not be right for you, your friends or family, and really just answer some of the questions that have been burning. So I will sort of jump into an overview, but again, feel free to interrupt if you have questions. I will try to monitor the chat, but again, feel free to raise your hand. Before we jump into it, if you just think, and maybe you can write into the chat, on a scale of 0 to 10, how well did you sleep last night? At least my Oura ring says I was 8.5, we'll say. And so I got pretty good sleep last night, although I had a little jitters before being in front of all of you. So pretty good, up and down. And then for anyone here who has injected themselves before, if you're willing to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, this includes anything. So we're talking about fertility, cancer, diabetes, Ozempic, anything. So we have a few people up and down. And then who here has used peptides? So this goes for glutathione. This we'll kind of count NAD as a peptide, even though it's really not. But Ozempic, Wegovy, tirzepatide, any of those. And then we'll count. We'll add in now like the topicals. There's a lot of topical peptides or oral peptides that people are using. They're kind of everywhere, right? So a lot of the times when you're picking up a drink, they'll say, "Oh, peptides are in this." So we'll keep this very broad. And sometimes people just don't even know what they are. They're like, "Oh, sounds like it's all the craze. I should probably take some." All right. So I'll tell you a bit about our why and my why. So when I was 6 years old, my father had cancer. He had lung cancer. And when people hear that, the question in their head is always the same. Did he smoke? It wasn't out of cruelty. It was because assigning fault was a bit easier than sitting with grief. And if it was his fault, then no one else had to carry the weight of it. So I watched that same pattern play out my entire career, just wearing different clothes. I always gravitated towards medicine and where stigma lies. I started my career early on in HIV/AIDS education prevention in the 90s. But this is where people felt judged instead of cared for. And in the emergency room, when people were arriving after years of drifting, gaining weight, losing energy, and quietly getting sicker, the system would tell them that they were fine, rather than tell them the truth. So, but the version I hear most often right now doesn't come into the emergency room right now. It comes from friends and family and women and men in rooms just like this one. Because some of you already know what I'm about to describe. It sort of starts with an apology, and there's a lot of guilt and shame into this. And it starts with like, I know it's not a lot, but it's probably something. And ever since I had the baby or menopause, or ever since I started working harder or traveling, everything has gotten harder. Losing weight has gotten harder. Sleeping has gotten harder. Energy has gotten harder. And then there's like a quieter, almost embarrassed, I just want to feel normal again. And it is, people apologize. Like you might apologize because you've already been told you're fine. Your labs are fine. Your weight is technically fine, but you're tired. And maybe it's because you're busy, and you're heavier because you had a baby, and you're foggy because you're getting older. And all of this is normal, and exactly what you were complaining about. But you run companies, you run departments, you run households. You can tell everyone in your life, you can ask anyone for anything. And yet you're apologizing for wanting to feel like yourself. So I want to say the things to you that I say to my friends. It is okay to want more energy. It's okay to want to lose 30 or 3 pounds. It's okay to want to sleep through the night and wake up feeling like a person. You don't have to be sick to deserve care. And I'll repeat that. You don't have to be sick to deserve care. You don't owe anyone an explanation or an apology for wanting to feel good in your own body, in your own life. And so I'm not judging you for that. I'm not here to be the 11th person in the room to tell you you're fine. And so peptides are the newest version of this same pattern. People turn to forums, unregulated vials, Instagram, you're doom scrolling on how to feel better, because legitimate medicine would rather assign blame or to say everything's okay rather than to have the harder conversation that does take time. And the gray market was never filling a gap in science. It was filling a gap in trust. So that's part of the reason why we built NoHo, physician-led, evidence first, and built so that no one has to apologize on the way in. So we're three things. We're doctors who actually listen, peptides you can actually verify, and a platform that keeps track of how you're actually doing. So this is why we're here. So again, you don't need to be sick to deserve care. So I will hand this off. I'll tell you a case study for a minute. I can advance my slide, which does not want to advance. Okay, here we go. All right, I will have Matt tell his story, but what I will want to say is that Matt, he appeared on my screen several months ago, and as a patient. So I'll hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Tina. This is an incredibly humbling group to be in front of. It's great to see everybody. This is probably the happiest day of my adult life. This photo is me a few years ago holding my daughter Josephine. This photo is one of those moments that was also a crazy wake-up call for me. Just by background, I'll give you a little context on who I am. My name is Matt Mazzio. I'm the co-founder and CEO at NoHo. Prior to this, I spent 15 years as a venture capitalist. So I spent most of my adult career investing and backing companies. I built a fund with a buddy of mine named Chris Sacca called Lowercase Capital. We were early investors in Slack and Stripe and Twitter and Uber and Instagram and Hinge and Handshake and a bunch of others. When Chris retired, I joined a firm called Coatue, if anybody's familiar with that firm. I built their venture capital strategy. At the time, the fund was mostly hedge fund, public equities, We took it from about 20 while I was there. By the time I left, I think it was about 70 billion under management, and we built the entire early stage practice there. Companies like Ramp and Supabase and Replit, where I was on the board, and a bunch of others. And then at 40, this is me. I'm 260 pounds in this photo. Uh, the other side of my life, the non-professional side, is I never met my grandfather, died in his 50s, heart attack. My dad, first heart attack, 40s. And this year was the year that I had my best professional year. I led the seed of Supabase and was on the board of Replit, and I was killing it. And I was also just killing myself. And I was pretty certain that I knew where this story goes. Definitely grandkids who never meet me, and I wasn't going to do it. And so I left. I left that career and decided that I needed to change. I was going to travel and figure it out. And at 40, I sort of retired. And I started, taking my health more seriously. And my entire life, I felt like I was struggling. And one day I'm at Y Combinator, for those who know what that is. It's a early stage technology conference, and I'm sitting with a friend, and the friend and I were always kind of the thick guys together. And he looks like a superhero. He looked like he had Benjamin Buttoned himself. He had gotten in the DeLorean, flipped back 10 years, and he looked like the most cut version of him I had ever seen. I known him 20 years, and this was not the guy that I knew. And I asked him how he had done it because I was just like dumbfounded when I looked at this guy. And he goes, "Oh, Maz, I'm on every peptide." And this was a year ago. And I'm like, "You sound like a TikTok video, buddy." And I was skeptical. I was like, "You mean the things from China that I hear about on affiliate codes that are sold by like random longevity docs that work out of strip malls on the internet?" And I was like, "That sounds crazy." And he's like, "You got to get in here. The science is real." And so I started digging like any good VC would. I mapped the market. I met every doctor, every researcher, every academic. I had nothing but time and resources. I was like, screw it. I'm going to make this my obsession because it's working for my friend. I met all the gym bros doing it, all the soldiers on it. I'm like writing down their stacks. I'm buying my fridge is now like $50,000 of peptide vials. I was enough of a chemistry kid to know that this is not how you do chemistry. And so I'm trying my best to become an expert here. I'm cloud coding 1911 PubMed studies on like where the medicine is, where it's not. And I come to a bunch of conclusions. One conclusion is the science is real. What started with insulin and then became GLP-1s was the beginning of a wave. Today, there's 1 in 8 Americans on GLP-1s. Very soon, there are going to be many more. And the reason is these are not the only peptides that matter. There are peptides that are going to impact biological processes in many categories. But two, the industry was disgusting. Broken supply chains, no good brands, no trust, doctors who don't know what they're doing, everyone relying on, hey, you're fine, or it's not there yet, and shoving you out of the room, leaving you to like go figure it out on your own with some guy that you met at the gym or in a strip mall. And I was just unsatisfied with that until one day I'm hanging out with the guys at 8VC, and the founder of Palantir, Joe Lonsdale, is a buddy, and he goes, what are you obsessed with?" I'm like, "The only thing my wife will tell you I've spent time on is peptides for the last 6 months." And he goes, "Me too. I've got the best doctor in this space. And my partner, Zach, is incubating a company here." I'm like, "I would love to meet her." And then I meet Tina, and you have all now met Tina, and she's spectacular. Harvard Business School, UCLA Medicine, 10 years director of quality at NYU. She's the best doctor you will ever meet, and she's the most knowledgeable person I've ever met in peptides. She's done the research, she's done the homework, and she doesn't approach it from a perspective of like, you're fine, get out. She meets you where the science is. And so I say, great, I'm going to sign up as your first patient at NoHo Labs. Put me in, coach. I'm like, this is what I want to do. These are what my goals are. And she's like, great, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to put together a protocol, and here's what we're going to test, and here's how we're going to measure, and here's where it's going to go. And we do it. And I run a 12-week protocol, and my body transforms. I go from like 240 pounds and 30% body fat to like sub 200 pounds and sub 12% body fat. My biomarkers go from like Matt needs to be on statins to every biomarker is optimal. And my Cedars doctor, who's a very nice, very expensive doctor, goes, "You need to be studied because you're more metabolically efficient." Look at this thing on the right. More metabolically efficient than the most elite Olympic endurance athletes. And by the way, team, I treated my body like a dumpster fire. I don't know about you. I treated my body like a dumpster fire for 20 years, and I just pushed myself to the limit in all of my jobs that I ever had. And now I'm standing in front of you today I was so inspired by my work and my friends' work and what happened because of Tina and the compounds and the way that we were running the care that I jumped in as co-founder and CEO to offer this to everybody. So we are NoHo Labs. We're building the most trusted brand in this category. We are vertically integrated with the world-class doctors. We've bought our own compounding pharmacy, run by a guy who won Compounding Pharmacist of the Year. Yes, that's a thing. And the way the system works is it's kind of a mirror of exactly what I got. You join as a member. It's $300 a month. You meet with Tina or one of our other incredible clinicians. They walk you through the science and your medical history. At the end, based on your goals, you get a protocol. Your first peptide is included in that $300 a month, and then we manage your care over time. And our goal is to drive world-class outcomes and build a generational company at the same time. So thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to get to share that story, and seeing that photo is both bittersweet, but mostly sweet.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. So I'm going to share. I see Summer in the audience, so I'm gonna share Summer as well really quickly. So Summer, I met Summer a few years ago as well. She came to me as a patient, and I won't go over her entire story right now, but I'm so proud of her. She's in the audience right now, and she's our head of support. These are her before and afters, and part of what gives me joy as a physician is to be able to change people's lives meaningfully, right? I see it in the emergency department when I am there, surely, but I want to be able to catch them before they break. So I've been lucky enough to catch a lot of people in my lifetime before they break. And so just wanted to be able to share her with you. Sorry, Summer, I didn't clear this with you before putting you in here, but I'm so proud of the work that you have done. So we'll sort of jump into we will talk about. I see some of the questions. I will save some of these. I'm gonna cover some of the things on peptides, risk and benefits. But before we get into this, so we'll start from the very beginning, which is what are peptides? So your body is essentially built from 20 amino acids. Think of them as letters, and you string them together, and you get a peptide. Stringing hundreds together, you get a protein. The difference is not really in length, but it's in job description. So proteins are structure, peptides are instructions. And if proteins are the hardware, peptides are the software. So every cell in your body is covered in receptors. Think of them as locks, and peptides are the keys. And the right peptide finds the right lock, and something happens. A hormone releases, your immune system responds, and your metabolism shifts. And that's the entire category. So peptides are how your cells talk to each other. And then, many of them by name, not just what they are. Oxytocin is a peptide, glucagon is a peptide, GLP-1 is the hormone behind Ozempic is a peptide. And this is the reason why everyone's suddenly talking about these. It's for three reasons. So one, the GLP-1s, they worked incredibly well, so publicly that they made an entire category legible. Nobody was discussing peptides at the dinner table in 2019. And so this was an explosion. And then two, peptides are very specific. A traditional drug is a sledgehammer, and that hits a lot of locks. And it was never aimed at that. The peptide is a key cut for one. And then three, and this is the uncomfortable one, is that they're hard to patent. What makes them relatively cheap to produce and easy to sell, and almost impossible to regulate. And that's kind of where some of the trouble starts. And we can go deep into, we've gone deep into patents and deep into regulation. We'll talk about a couple of peptides. I am just a sleep advocate because I do think that is the basis of many of people's energy, recovery, et cetera. And so for those who gave a number on sleep that was anywhere below 8. You have some people who have their superpower is sleep, and I congratulate you for that. But many of us have had many problems with sleep. So maybe you've been very disciplined and you go to sleep before 11, but maybe you still wake up at 1 to 3 o'clock in the morning and you're wide awake and you think that that's abnormal. So as an ER doctor, I've tried every sleep medication under the sun: Lunesta, Sunata, Ambien, Trazodone, all the over-the-counter ones. And most of them, they seem benign. We start off with some teas, and then you go to magnesium, and then you go to melatonin. Now, these are huge therapeutic windows. Number one, you can have a microdose of melatonin and it would work for you, or 15 milligrams of melatonin. Same thing with magnesium, huge therapeutic windows. But what you don't know is that many of these drugs are also used for seizures. So magnesium is used as a great seizure medication. And so the reason why is because it relaxes you. And now you might not wake up at 2 o'clock anymore, but you take more and more and more. And then in the morning, you feel very groggy. And so the way that epitalon works, and it's such an interesting one that we'll talk about a bit more when I go over some of the FDA movement in the past couple of weeks. So epitalon is on the list of one of the peptides that is going to be available for compounding in the future. Now, the way that epitalon works is that it works on your pineal gland and your pinealocytes in your brain, right? So your pineal gland produces melatonin. And so when you take epitalon, what it does is your body naturally produces more melatonin. And it works with your circadian rhythm so that you don't have this like hangover in the morning. Now, this is the first peptide that I wanted to try because I was like, oh man, if I'm going to try anything, I want data. Like I need data. So this was kind of average for me before, right? So I'd go to sleep at around 11:15. And then I would kind of roll, or I'd wake up, have my 2 o'clock wake up, try to go back to sleep, and then sort of roll around in bed and surf when I wake up at 6. I try to go back to sleep. Sometimes I'd be able to go back to sleep, but most of the time I will not. And finally, when I'm like, oh, I should get up, I get up. Because this is kind of was average for me last year. Now, fast forward, I remember after a week or two of epitalon, and I thought to myself, the first thought when I woke up was, oh my God, I'm going to live forever. And then the second thought was like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought that as a third thought. Or the second thought. The third thought was like, I got to pee. I got to go do all the things, get kids ready. But it was pretty remarkable. The difference that you feel first thing in the morning when you sleep well. And for those of you who have had those one-off nights of just amazing sleep, you know what I'm talking about. But this was, this was last week. So I had a 94 this week. And so this was, it is more regular now. So if you look, I tried to go to sleep at the same time around 11:15, same thing as before. I didn't have that wake in the middle of the night. And then when I woke up, I woke up. And then in the morning, you just feel so much better. So if you look at like these numbers, if you look at the REM sleep and the deep sleep and the efficiency, I'm just getting better sleep. And I'm not spending any more time. I'm just being more efficient. And so these are some of the things. And from taking oral sleep medications for 20 years, I was able to peel off of sleep medications. So this for me was like a big win. And so part of the question is why now? Okay, so GLP-1s really normalized injectables. It was just another delivery mechanism. You didn't have to feel icky for when you were doing an injection. And it's many of the delivery mechanisms, especially injectables, are often more effective than pills or patches. And for health optimization and longevity, your fine is no longer acceptable for this audience. So people are taking direct control over their health. Now, peptide science is nothing new, but everything changed recently. And so for most of modern history, injectables were associated again with like serious disease, insulin, chemotherapy, anticoagulants. And then the GLP-1s normalized that self-injection for tens of millions of people is okay. And once that psychological barrier fell, an entire category of biologic therapies suddenly became viable. And so GLP-1s did not create peptide medicine. It simply revealed what peptides can do. And so when most people hear the word peptides, they think of weight loss, and that is understandable. And GLP-1s, again, I'm board certified in obesity medicine. This is a great tool. And they're one of the most successful pharmaceutical classes in history. But that's only one application. So peptide signaling touches nearly every regulatory system in the body. And it's not just a category, it's a biological platform. So here's the strange part of the field is that the science has existed for decades, but it's largely lived in three places: in research papers, in biohacker forums and in high-end clinics. And so part of the reason why I was very excited to speak to this audience today is because you really, like, for the past year, 2 years, 3 years, you would see this in the biohackers. It's mainly guys, and it's mainly like you have to know a bro who knows a bro in a garage. And I hear it all the time. Like, people feel very embarrassed where they got their peptides from. And so now it is becoming more mainstream. People are talking about it. It's a dinner time conversation. But the science existed before, the access did not. And so that's exactly the gap that we're discovering. And this is what we're trying to solve. And so I'll spend a couple minutes. I'll leave plenty of time for questions. I know there's a ton. So 2 weeks ago, and this is like hot off the presses, an FDA advisory committee spent 2 days on 7 peptides in public, on the record. They were many were debated previously. There was a list, and we and the broader scientific, anyone here can nominate peptides. And we certainly nominated many more than 7. But 6 out of the 7 got a favorable vote. And that is the BPC, body protective compound. And this is probably the one that you've heard about the most. KPV, TB500, MOTS-c, Epitalon, and SMAX. Now, someone's got to rebrand some of these, and they're very difficult to remember as alphabet soup. But we'll touch on a couple of them that are more well known. Okay, so I already talked about Epitalon, but this has never happened before. So these compounds have lived in a gray zone for years, and the Federal Advisory Panel just said out loud that they deserved a legal path. And the people who voted yes were clinicians, and some of them were voted no on these, and so it was a mixed panel. But they went further than the agency's own scientists were willing to go. And I want to be clear that this was not an approval, and so this was an advisory committee. And so to be precise, this was a recommendation and not an approval. The rulemaking still has to happen, and it takes time. But I do think that this is good news, because when you look at how they did this, they didn't wave through a category. They did evaluate each specific compound for a specific indication. BPC was for ulcerative colitis. MOTS-c was for obesity and osteoporosis. And this is what it looks like when a field stops being like a wellness trend and starts to be more medicine-based. And so we're at the beginning of the paperwork, not the end of science. And that gap is runway. It's time to build the protocols, the monitoring, and the evidence based properly before that access arrives. But this is what we're doing. And so we are very upfront with what peptides are. They are for research. There's many peptides out there right now that are for research use only. We do guide patients if they want to come to us and say, like, hey, I'm taking stacks and stacks of peptides, help me. We will help facilitate, and we'll give you some recommendations when appropriate. And we're certainly going to lean on the peptides that are available through compounding pharmacies as well. So, but we do want to be on the forefront. We want to come to where patients are. And so, what we really believe is that the science is what makes it real. We know how peptides work, receptors, signal, and response. That's not speculative, that's physiologic. And GLP-1s proved at scale what can happen when you're right. Doctors are what make it viable. Unfortunately, we are not trained on these peptides in medical school because a molecule is not a treatment. What turns a compound into medicine is a clinician who knows your history, helps you with your protocol, reads your labs, and adjusts. That part can't be skipped and shouldn't be skipped. It shouldn't be bought, directly off the internet in vials. Who knows where you're getting your bacteriostatic water? Even the syringes, I would question some of those. But truly, the results are what make peptides kind of inevitable, and why some of the regulatory bodies need to catch up with what people are doing. Or you see these in the numbers. Matt's ApoB went from 116 to 72. His triglycerides went from 240s to 30s, which is remarkable. Even the hemoglobin A1C went from 5.3 to 5.0. That was just in 6 months, truly. And he's gotten even better since. And so when you see numbers like that in a person, you actually know, this kind of stops to be as much of debate. People start to switch from like, no, 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 no. And you see this in doctors right now. They are like, they were kicking and screaming 2 or 3 years ago. And now they're like, well, maybe. Okay. And so that is part of our job, my job, is to bring anecdotal evidence to being evidence informed. It's not going to be FDA approved in the near future. They aren't going to go through phase 1, 2, 3 trials, and we can debate about pharma and their incentives and motives. But what I really want to emphasize here is that regardless of like what we think, if I'm not telling anyone here that they should be using all these peptides. I'm saying that you should be educated on, and you can make your own decisions as adults. But we are at a watershed moment. And not just because of a molecule, not just because of a vote in July. I think it's partially because expectations have changed. We have a generation of people that decided that not being sick is not the same as being well. And they stopped being willing to wait until something breaks before paying attention. I think that's the actual shift. Everything else is logistics, and we'll figure that out. But it is the mindset of truly that fine is not good enough. So this sort of brings me back to where I started. Every one of you has been told you are fine. Your labs are fine. Your weights may be fine. Your labs might be fine. All of it might be fine. And you're just busy. You're just going through menopause. You're just going through midlife. You're just blah, blah, blah. You're just starting a new job. Be gentle on yourself. And I agree with that. Or you're just getting older, as we all are. But fine isn't good enough, not for my patients, not for my friends. And truly, I want everybody in this room, and we have patients on our site from 1999, truly. And I hear it, I do hear it quite often for our 70-year-olds, 65-year-olds, 60-year-olds. I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life. I feel like I have the most energy I've ever felt. I have many patients who said, I slept like a teenager. And these are the things that keep us going as a company, because it is truly outcomes. And so as a physician, part of my responsibility is to have people live the best lives they can. And so if anything I said today sounded like your own life, feel free to come to us or any other doctor that is an expert in the field. But let us look at your labs and let us figure out what's actually going on. There's a code up here that you can feel free to use it. It gives you a first month in credit, but the code isn't really the point. The point is that you should never really have to apologize for wanting to feel like yourself again. So I'll pause there. Very educated group of people in this room. So I will take, let me go
Yes,
through
there's a number of questions. Yes, a number of questions, Dr. Wu. I think the ones that have repeated enough is, I would say, two areas. One is, aside from weight loss and sleep, focusing on some of the other areas, but the most critical one is what are the risks and the side effects, because of the fact that we're accustomed to, other than supplements that we can buy, in a drugstore, we're accustomed to not doing treatments unless they've been FDA approved, et cetera. And because of what you mentioned in the beginning, that peptides have been around for a long time, but it's almost the equivalent of, buying drugs on a street corner in terms of access to it. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the side effects and or the risks, or when it isn't appropriate, and just some of the things to help people get the full picture?
Yeah. We hear this quite commonly, and it is a very, very good question. Anyone who's going to tell you, I did walk into a facility one time and they said, we've sold 3 million vials and no side effects. And I walked out. It was like, well, how are you tracking? And what is the number that people are reporting? And so as the director of quality of NYU for over a decade in the emergency department, this is something that is near and dear to me, is to not mislead people, right? There's no free lunch, as what we say, right? Everything has a side effect. Even if you take vitamin C, if you take too much vitamin C, there are side effects to that. If you too much coffee, any of the supplements, there are side effects, and especially with injectables. And we see that. So we've had at least probably around about 100,000 shots on our site of people injecting themselves. And we certainly see the side effect per different category is very different, right? Peptides is these are, if you think of them as, some of them are medications and some of them are in this like gray zone of research use only. And so that being said, they're not all the same, right? It's like if I ask you what are the side effects for over the counter medications, they're just going to be the best, right? So Tylenol is one of the top causes of accidental liver failure. Motrin is going to burn a hole in your stomach and can cause renal failure. So there's many different side effects for medications. Now, peptides in and of themselves, the reason why we like to talk about how they can go toe to toe, at least with some of the medications. We'll talk Motrin, for example. So Motrin, you take it orally. You have to have very, very high doses because it has to get through your stomach lining, which it still burns a hole in your stomach lining. And then eventually it'll get to your sprained ankle of where it's hurting, or your painful knees. And so then it has to get excreted by your kidneys. And so if you have any sort of kidney failure, any sort of kidney problems that are significant, they'll tell you no more NSAIDs, no more Motrin, Aleve, that entire class is gone, right? BPC, which is one of the more popular ones out there, body protective compound, what it does is it causes angiogenesis. Okay, so it shunts blood to injured areas. And so for people that even if you're walking around on a day-to-day basis, you have aches and pains, I have plantar fasciitis, so I do take that because it helps with my plantar fasciitis goes away. I'm able to exercise and I'm able to like live my life without pain. And so, and for me, what I believe is that it is a better alternative than some of the, certainly better than opioids, and the medications out there. Now, from a safety profile, it is very different when you're talking about some of the newer ones, right? I get messages all the time. What do you think about AOD 294? You know, there's like many peptides that are not widely used that people are still using. So I get those questions often. Now, one can argue for some of them, like BPC that just went through committee, they have looked at databases of side effects, right? They've also looked at databases of whether this causes cancer and whether this causes this or that. And some of them I'll be very, very transparent that these studies, there's been over 200 studies, they're preclinical, meaning that they were done in animals. They haven't been done in like the real rigorous trials in humans, nor will they be. But that being said, this has been around for decades and decades. It's WADA banned. So we don't have any professional athletes on our site because you cannot use it. It's considered performance enhancing. But we have like coaches and former professional athletes, many other people on our site that are using some of these compounds. Now, for the side effect, BPC is in combination with others, you'll see some of the injection site reactions. I have not seen, and it doesn't mean it's not out there, I haven't seen significant allergic reactions to it. And some of the argument for the safety profile of peptides is that, yes, you'll see it like these are naturally occurring. And so there is a relatively good side effect profile for BPC. I'll separate that out. There's different categories from the growth hormone secretagogues, right? Sermorelin, tesamorelin, you have CJC, ipamorelin. There's many of the growth hormone secretagogues that people like to pair with their GLP-1s. If you're going to lose muscle, you want to like actually take something to keep that muscle. And these have significant side effects. Yeah, you'll see it in the literature for tesamorelin was FDA approved for HIV lipodystrophy back in the day. Sermorelin has been used for short stature for decades and decades. And we will see hypersensitivity reactions. We'll see injection site reactions on that one as well. So, and this is like important for the audience to know. Anytime you see anyone's like, there's no side effects, of course there's side effects. And, you know, as we're going through individuals and risk tolerance and pros and cons, again, we have adult conversations of what your goals are, and we decide together whether it makes sense. Even for those who have active cancer, I had a patient with active cancer that says, "I'm going to take this anyways. Please help." everyone else is telling me don't do this, and I also said don't do this, but if you are going to do this, like let me tell you the risks and benefits of this. And so this is kind of where I view myself as like a responsible, real physician, to be able to come to the patient. But yes, lot of risk and benefits, a lot of benefits as well.
Okay, so a couple of the questions that came up as well when you were speaking about pain relief, and that's one of
Mhm.
the uses that things like Motrin, or, if you've had gum surgery and you get 800 milligrams of that, it's for 10 days. It's short-term use. So are peptides for many of these uses meant to be short-term and then,
Yeah,
or do you have to then take them forever?
it depends on the person. So it truly does depend on the person. We are in collaboration with several orthopedic doctors from like very big academic clinics to run these trials. Actually, these are going to be IRB approved trials on humans. And so because of there's many orthopedists out there that believe in the science behind it, and they believe that it is a better alternative to any of the NSAIDs. If you look at the literature for NSAIDs, to be honest, like many orthopedists don't recommend them, because there's actually enough preclinical evidence that it delays healing. So some of the orthopods will actually tell you to not use NSAIDs depending on your fractures, but that's a whole other conversation. So not and now on the cycling, it depends on the person, right? So my plantar fasciitis flares, and when it flares, I will do a bigger course of BPC. Other ones, I will do a maintenance. So everything's inflamed. I'm just like, it's too much information for you guys. Like, I'm just an inflamed person. I have allergies. I have like a whole bunch of things. And so because of that, my biomarkers, some of my like inflammatory markers are elevated. I wanted to drive those down to see how I could feel. And when I drove those numbers down using some of the peptides, my tongue is not as swollen. There's like my joints don't hurt as much. I feel more energy, and I'm going to argue that I probably have a lower cancer risk because I'm not as inflamed as I was a year ago. So some of them I will take during acute injury, and those can be short. Like some people will feel better in a week or two, depending on what their injury is, and they can peel off. If it comes back, then we can put people on a longer cycle. And then some will be taking this regularly. So I've taken some of my stacks for months and months and months. And there's a debate, and this is a true debate, as to the pros and cons of cycling on and off. So and then happy to debate that as well of cycling.
Sure. Well, another question came up from Amy. Because Matt mentioned tremendous results for his lipid profile, and we probably have many people here on statins because there's
Yeah.
so many in the population on it. Um, what Talk about that a little bit? Like, why does it help? Does it replace statins? And, what does that do for you? What are the pros and cons?
Yeah. The goal is to lower the cholesterol, right? Like I think that's 95% of doctors will say like lower cholesterol is probably better. Now I would never say stop your statin and switch to this without any evidence, right? So what I would say is for the people who, again, like there's probably half of this audience right now, it's like maybe borderline or high cholesterol, and the doctor's like, let it roll for 3 to 6 months to a year and see what you can do. Now, most of this is actually genetic, unfortunately. You get a very, very healthy diet. I hear all the time, like, I do everything. I like eat so well. I exercise all the time. I do everything. My cholesterol and hemoglobin A1C and all these things are still rising. Now, these are used in concert, right? So your body is going to respond differently to different peptides, right? So some of them are metabolized through the liver, and even if you're on a GLP-1, because like it is sometimes you just need a spark. And that spark, I see it with so many of my patients of like, you just need a little push. Maybe that is a little GLP-1. Maybe that's a little growth hormone secretagogue. Maybe that is a little bit more sleep. Maybe it's a little bit more NAD for energy or MOTS or this or that. Like maybe you just need a little bit of push. Then you can change your habits. And within a couple of weeks, maybe you start working out more. Maybe you start to feel better. And then it's like the peptides aren't a be all end all. They're not magical, right? We view this as an orchestra, and maybe this is the drum beat, right? Maybe you just needed that initial drumbeat to get you started. And so it's not like you're like, our peptide's going to do this, fix this one specific number, maybe. Like it might help. But you have to do all the other things. Right? You have to increase your protein, you have to do resistance training, you have to do the work. Yes, Ozempic, you're like maybe magically going to lose 5, 10, 20 pounds. But if you do it the right way, there's better benefits and long-term benefits, because the data does show, even with, you'll see this with much of the GLP-1 data, is that 80% of people, when they get off of it, will gain the weight back. Now, if you look at my friend Summer out here, who was able to lose over 100 pounds, she was only on a GLP-1 initially for about 6 months. And then she was able to lose 50 more pounds off the GLP-1s because she made that change in her lifestyle and habits. And so for any of these peptides, it is that maybe you had that plantar fasciitis where you couldn't run. And like now that pain goes away, everything else gets better. So it's not necessarily just the BPC or the TB or the glow stack, whatever I'm using, that made my cholesterol go down. It's because I'm able to exercise and eat better because of some of these peptides.
So there's another question about because people join their subscription and you get some initial assessment. How much direct clinician interaction time do you get in exchange for the monthly membership fee?
Yeah.
Is it something that you have to subscribe to forever, or can you get on and then you get improvements and whatever you needed and then you're okay?
Yeah. So this is a mistake probably because we're early stage startup and we have great clinicians who have capacity. So right now you can say, come hang out. So some people have a visit every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. What we like to do is the cadence. We don't cap the number of visits right now. The cadence is that if you start with us, you get it's like 50 minutes to an hour initial visit with a clinician. And then afterwards, we do 1 week if you need help with first injection. And then we do 1 month, 2, 3 month follow-ups, and then ongoing. So the stacks change. Okay. It's one thing if I'm like, here's your statin, take it forever. That's very hands-off. And unfortunately, that's all the time primary care doctors have. And so, but for us, we're much more high touch. These are injectables. You change on and off. Some of these things work, some of them don't. We check biomarkers. We want to know what your sleep scores are. We do recommend certain scans at certain times. We have certain labs that we want to check every 3 months. There's ones that are higher risk, lower risk. So there is significant monitoring for the patient. So that the first month that that I'm comping for this audience, you'll get a lot out of that first month. So you'll spend an hour with a clinician. Peptides are on top of that.
Okay. So in terms of with each of you're getting data with each of the people who sign on. And granted, there's a broad list of peptides, and you probably have a broad list of people that sign up. It's not like they come on for one thing. So that makes it a lot trickier to get, meaningful results. But how do you track it, and is it published? And do you try to focus on one area or another specifically so you can both help people in that area, maybe where you've had the best results, or so you'd have more depth research to publish?
So we're going to be doing it in several different ways. One, again, we're like a seed stage startup, so I'm trying to boil the ocean right now. But we are setting up the infrastructure right now to actually have a research arm. So that's like our own independent research arm. We are collaborating with people at institutions that are submitting IRBs right now. We're going to do independent IRBs, and we're also going to do ones through academic institutions as well. And then as far as what we're setting up, they're basically going to be there. It's very expensive, as everyone in the audience knows, to be able to do randomized control trials, right? So what we're going to be doing is likely going to be doing prospective observational studies. So for those that opt in. So right now, Everything's we're not publishing anyone's names or identifiers by any way, shape, or form. We do have probably 2 or 3 case studies that we do need to publish when I can pick my head up and write and write those up. And so from a research perspective, we want to be on the forefront of this, and we are setting up the infrastructure to be able to do that.
And how does this relate to, and this is probably the wrong term, but the broad term of personalized medicine,
Mhm.
where it's you work with the individual. How do you determine what's the right peptide and the right dosage? And I realize some of this is trial and error, that,
Mhm.
you might try something that didn't do anything, or yes, it did, but I didn't like the side effect. How do you work with patients like that, since this is a new area, or let's just say access is new and it might be new to the people who come to
Mhm.
you?
Yeah, and that's part of what we do. I assume that, we have the whole full spectrum of people that have been doing peptides for 5 years and are like have gone rogue, is what we say, to those that start with what is a peptide, right? And like my friends are talking about it, I want to look and feel better, and so we start wherever people are at, and we want to make sure what's realistic, right? The stack that me and Matt are on, it's very, very different than the stack that a new person is going to be on, right? And so part of it is like when we say personalized medicine, is like getting to know you. Like Deb, if you wanted to come I would go through all of your past medical history, your medications, what are your allergies? Do you have stomach pain? Do you have renal failure? What are your history of this and that? And design a protocol for you specifically. I don't have a cookie cutter we use AI. We are an AI company that we use a lot of AI for Eng. But at the core of it, we still have our patient physician relationship, and we are not putting like a bot. You're not like we're not just like running an algorithm for you. We're truly designing this for the individual.
Okay. And then some people are also asking, they worry about the sourcing. I mean, this is also an issue with supplements where people say, yeah, some are more pure than others. You don't know where it's coming from, but particularly for peptides, um, how do you source them, and how do you determine that they're safely sourced
Yeah.
versus cheap? Let's
Yep.
just put it that way.
So we step foot in all the facilities, right? So me or one of our advisors or one of our staff step foot in all the facilities. So that goes from raw materials, which are very transparently most of them are Asia because of the EPA, and there's all sorts of reasons why all like Lilly and Pfizer and Novo, all the big pharma companies also have most of the raw materials in Asia. Now you go from raw materials to manufacturing to supply and distributing. And along the way, you have many different tests. And so that goes for, HPLC. This goes for, are you even getting the right peptide, right? What is the correct raw material? And then at the very end of this all, you test for sterility, endotoxins, and purity. And you get a certificate of analysis for that. And then we do a batch testing of like after it's done all the testing along the way, then we take a batch of 200 and then retest it independently. And we are so rigorous in our testing. It's not like the peptide you're using is the peptide I'm using. Like it's very much like it is what we believe in, and that's what we have to stand on, right? Because this is like truly patient care, and not only we don't like give people peptides and like see you later. Like I'm your doctor now, and I take responsibility for that. And as the owner of this company, I take responsibility for the purity of these peptides as well. So a lot of end-to-end testing. If you're going to like YOLO and like go out in the world and get these peptides, please like make sure that you're getting the certificate of analysis for the peptides that you're using, because we definitely like there's some peptides that we see and we're like, oh, it is a 12% difference, which is greater than pharmaceutical standards of 10%. So there's an overfill, there's an underfill, and then we have to like pause that peptide for a while. And that's like upsetting to the patients, but it is what we have to do from a safety perspective. So this is near and dear and core to what we believe in.
Okay, now I'm looking to see, as we're running out of time, if there's any questions that I may have missed. Um, So the regulation, I believe, that has come up, you mentioned, will take
A
time,
while. Yeah, that's gonna take a
months or
while.
years.
Yeah.
So for people who want to wait until the FDA officially approved it, they've got a way to go.
Yes. And
Um,
I'll also mention one thing that I didn't see actually, like just be careful on the retatrutide. I have strong opinions on that. So like if we want to get on like a call on that one as well, if you guys want to like just spend doctor time with any of our clinicians, we have opinions on the movement of the obesity medicine market as well. So there's a lot more to come on this.
okay. Um, and if there's any particular um, issue or things like getting back to the statins that affect a lot of people, is there a place that you can send them or any particular research that you have available if somebody wants to look up or do a little more research for a particular application?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would honestly like I use AI all the time, and so I would just put in the right prompts and make sure that if you're using Claude or Gemini or GPT or any of your AI buddies, just make sure that you have your correct prompts so that you are looking at primary sources, so FDA, CDC, and reputable sources. Otherwise, you're going to scrape like trash in, trash out, and so there's a lot of like misinformation that even comes through GPT and AI because of all the different like row sites that are out there.
Okay. And one other question I may have missed is the use of peptides to address peripheral neuropathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can certainly talk about that. Part of this is it depends on the reason for peripheral neuropathy and whether it's because of diabetes versus other reasons. And so it's one of the reasons why it's like just want to like if you get on with a clinician, you want to just like talk about peripheral neuropathy or talk about your osteoarthritis, talk about your torn meniscus, or there's a lot of different use cases. And so we'll be happy to see anybody here.
Okay. Great. Well, as you see, we had lots and lots of questions. I hope we covered all of them. Certainly, I learned about a lot of different peptides, at least the names of them that I can look up further. But it certainly has been interesting from the standpoint of either what we don't know and need to learn more of, as well as resources that might be available. And let me just see, because I know we've got some more coming in, mainly some thank yous. So we wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to come out and give us more information. Hopefully, most of us have walked away knowing a little more than we did when we came in.
And just,
And
I
best,
wanted to thank the HBS Women's Association and all of the clubs that were able to advertise this. I appreciate you inviting me to give this talk and more broadly, volunteering your time to organize these. I know it's a lot of work, so I really appreciate the organizers as well.
so, well, thank you very much and good luck with your new business adventure. When did you form it again? The last year?
Last year. Yeah. Last year.
Yes. Okay. So you are in the early stages. So best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye,
Take care.
everybody.